Imagine scientists dig up a 700-year-old tooth from a dead man buried in the desert, and that one tooth, that single piece of bone, destroys everything historians thought they knew about an entire people. That happened in 2003, and nobody talked about it enough. This is the story of the Navajo Nation, nearly 400,000 people, the largest federally recognized tribe in the United States, a people whose history, we were told, was understood, settled, written into textbooks, and left there, undisturbed, for decades. But it wasn't settled, not even close. And what the DNA inside that ancient tooth revealed, I need you to stay with me. Because by the end of this, you will never look at the idea of where people come from the same way again. And this is just the beginning of what DNA evidence is showing us about our forgotten past. If you make it to the end of this video, you'll understand something about Navajo history and survival that most people never get to know. So if you love deep history documentaries, hit subscribe right now, because we drop stories like this every single week. Let's start with what we thought we knew. The Navajo speak a language called Dinbizad, and that language is extraordinary, not because it's beautiful, but because it's completely alone. It bears almost no resemblance to the languages of its neighbors, the Pueblo peoples, the other Southwest tribes. Linguistically, the Navajo are an island, surrounded by strangers, except they're not strangers to one group, the Apache. And further north, deep into Canada, into Alaska, into the Yukon, that's where the linguistic family connects, a family called Athabaskan. So the story went like this. Somewhere between 1300 and 1500 C, the ancestors of the Navajo migrated south, out of Western Canada, down through the great interior of the continent, and eventually into the Four Corners region, that red rock country where Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico meet, where the sky is enormous and the land feels ancient, because it is. The linguistics matched. The oral tradition spoke of a long journey from the north. Anthropologists agreed. Historians agreed, and the case was closed. But something about the Navajo never quite fit that closed case. A friction, small, persistent, the kind of thing you can ignore for a long time, until you can't. Here's what bothered the careful researchers. The Navajo didn't just arrive in the Southwest and set up camp. They arrived and became something entirely different, something new. They learned to herd sheep from the Spanish. They became master silversmiths, borrowed that too. They adopted the loom, the weaving traditions of the Pueblo people, and turned them into an art form so refined that Navajo rugs today sell for thousands of dollars. They absorbed elements of Pueblo spirituality into their own ceremonies, layer after layer after layer. Borrowed, internalized, transformed. Now cultures borrow from each other. That's normal, that's human. But this was different. This wasn't casual influence. The Navajo didn't borrow and keep those things separate, the way you might pick up a phrase in another language, but still think in your own. They absorbed these things completely. They became, in a real sense, a synthesis, a people built from multiple streams, woven together into something coherent and new. Anthropologists called it cultural diffusion. Historians called it adaptation. And for a long time, that framing held. Then the geneticists arrived, and the framing shattered. The first wave of DNA studies came in the 1990s. Researchers examined mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed only through the mother's line, and on the surface, the results were clean. The Navajo showed haplogroups, genetic signatures, consistent with indigenous populations across the Americas. The story pointed back through the continent, across the ancient land bridge, connecting Siberia and Alaska, back to Northeast Asia. Everything confirmed. Everything tidy. There were anomalies, small ones, frequencies that didn't quite match other Athabaskan populations, markers that appeared without obvious explanation. But scientists attributed them to genetic drift, the random wobble that happens in small populations over time, and moved on. But then they looked at the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome passes only through the paternal line, father to son, back through time. And what they found there was not what they expected. The maternal line said one thing, the paternal line said something else entirely. When two genetic streams point in different directions, that is not a coincidence. That is not noise. That is a signal. That is the data trying to tell you something your theory hasn't accounted for. The Y chromosome data carried haplogroups, genetic signatures, that didn't align with other Athabaskan populations. Signatures pointing toward older, deeper admixture events. Populations mixing. Ancient people meeting and merging in ways the migration model had never predicted. And now the question that should keep you watching. Who were those people? Where did they come from? And why did they leave a mark on the Navajo and apparently nowhere else? There are 3 theories, and I want you to sit with all 3 of them, because none of them is fully satisfying, and that discomfort is the point. The first theory is the most straightforward. As the ancestors of the Navajo moved south through the Great Plains, they encountered other peoples. They intermarried. They absorbed men from other populations into their communities, through alliance, through marriage, through whatever the messy social arrangements of prehistory actually looked like. The Y chromosome reflects those men. The mitochondrial DNA reflects the continuity of the women. 2 different histories, 2 different sexes, not contradictory, just layered. The second theory is harder to say out loud in academic circles. A small number of researchers have proposed that the genetic anomalies point to something even older, to contact, before Columbus, with populations that didn't arrive via the Bering Land Bridge at all. Transoceanic contact, the Pacific, the deep Atlantic. Ideas that mainstream archaeology has resisted for decades because the evidence has always been thin, and because the history of that particular claim has often been tangled up with bad actors and worse agendas. But genetic data has a habit of forcing uncomfortable ideas back onto the table. The third theory doesn't look outward at all. It looks inward, at the migration itself. Maybe the southward movement of the ancestral Navajo wasn't a single coherent group. Maybe it was a patchwork. Different bands, different bloodlines, moving at different times, absorbing each other, merging and separating across centuries of travel. Maybe the founding population was never as simple as the textbooks implied. All 3 theories contain something true. None of them fully resolves the data. And then, in 2021, a study was published that made all 3 of them feel almost quaint. The study came from Harvard's Department of Human Evolutionary Biology and the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. It used whole genome sequencing, not the narrow snapshots of mitochondrial or Y chromosome studies, but the full genetic text. Hundreds of indigenous individuals across the Americas, ancient samples and modern ones. The results confirmed what earlier studies had suggested, that the Navajo genome carried multiple distinct ancestry streams that could not be explained by a single migration event. But that wasn't the part that stopped the researchers cold. The part that stopped them cold was this. When they compared the Navajo genome to populations it was not supposed to be related to, they found a match, a partial one, but undeniable. The signal they found had previously been detected in only one other place on the continent, the Amazon basin, thousands of miles away. A completely different environment, a completely different culture, a completely different linguistic family, the same ancient genetic echo in both places. This signal, researchers called it Population Y, the Y standing for the mystery itself, had already puzzled scientists when it first appeared in South American samples. It had been tentatively linked to an ancient wave of migration, people with genetic affinities to Australasians or certain East Asian populations, a movement that predated or ran alongside the main founding migration of the Americas and left scattered traces across the continent, like footprints in sand that the tide almost erased. Finding those footprints in the Southwest was not predicted. It was not in any model, and it did not make the story simpler. What it suggested, and researchers chose their words carefully here, speaking in probabilities and not certainties, was that the very first people to enter the Americas were not a single homogeneous group, that the population which crossed the land bridge carried within it ancient threads from migrations so old they predate any written record by tens of thousands of years, and that the Navajo in their genome carry a whisper of those people, people's names we will never know, whose faces we cannot reconstruct, whose stories exist now only in the language of nucleotides. The story didn't get smaller, it got older and vast. I kept thinking while reading all of this about a word in Din, the Navajo language. The word is ho-jo. It's usually translated as harmony or beauty or balance. But the translation is always imprecise because the word holds all 3 simultaneously. It describes a state in which everything is in right relationship, the world as it should be. The scientists were looking for ho-jo in the data. A clean tree, a linear descent, a story with a beginning, a middle, and a legible end. And the data kept refusing them. Not because the data was wrong, but because human history is not a tree. It is a web. It is people moving and merging and separating and moving again across tens of thousands of years, leaving traces in each other's genomes, the way rivers leave traces in rock. Slow, permanent, invisible, until you know how to look. We have always wanted human history to be legible. To say, these people came from there, they are related to those people, the lines of descent run like this. The map is knowable. It's an understandable need. Maybe it's even an inevitable one. But genomic science has spent the last 2 decades quietly dismantling that need, one ancient tooth at a time. Every human population is a palimpsest, a document written and erased and written again, each layer leaving traces beneath the surface of the current text. The Navajo are not unusual in this. They are simply one of the populations whose layers we have begun, very slowly, very carefully, to read. And here is what that reading tells us. In the end, the Navajo are not simply southern Athabaskans. They are not simply the product of a 700-year migration from Canada. They carry in their blood the echo of a founding population, more ancient and more diverse than any model had predicted. They carry the cultural inheritance of the Pueblo peoples, the Spanish, the land itself. They carry, somewhere deep in their paternal line, the genetic memory of men whose origins remain genuinely unknown. They are not what we thought they were, because what we thought was too small. The story is deeper. The roots reach further down, into time and into the earth, than our maps ever showed. And that is not a mystery resolved. It is a mystery enlarged, which is the only honest place that science can ever really take you. One tooth, dug from the desert. 2003, everything we thought we knew, gone.